Dear viewers, welcome to the show POWERchat, Nepal's only TV talk show in English discussing development since 2016. Through this episode tonight, we are discussing about freedom of expression in Nepal with particular focus on internet freedom. And I am joined tonight by Advocate Baburam Aryal. He is the CEO at Internet Governance Institute, long engaged in the advocacy of internet freedom in Nepal. Let's talk. Welcome to the show, Mr. Aryal.
Thank you very much.
How have you been?
It's good going.
Well, you have long engaged in the advocacy for digital rights in Nepal.
Yeah.
And also leading an organization called Internet Governance Institute here in Nepal. How do you observe the overall freedom of expression situation in Nepal at the moment?
To be very quick and specific, digital rights in Nepal is shrinking, and the various environments, contributors in the environments are attacking internet freedom in Nepal. So, to be very precisely, internet freedom is in challenge or in stake in Nepal.
What are the key challenges that one faces when going with the freedom of speech over internet?
To talk positively, internet has been used by various level of stakeholders, like entrepreneurs are using this, students are using this, politicians are using this, criminals are using this. But most of the challenge are coming from the state itself, because state is that much rude about the platform of internet, particularly when freedom of expression comes about. Rulers are very fear from the expression of people, opinion of the people. So rulers, they want to control people, and rulers are very much aware that internet is that kind of platform where they cannot precisely control the opinion of people. So now they want to control their regime, they want to continue their regime, whoever comes in powers, irrespective of political parties, whether current ruling group of NCP or other group of NCP or other opposition parties. Whenever they come into the power, they want to control to the people's expression, because the character of rulers is that they want to continue their rule in the power.
Well, Mr. Aryal, what you have to say to the fact that over internet platforms, people have contributed positively for finding solutions to the ongoing debate here in Nepal?
Yeah, absolutely. The internet has become very powerful tool for the people. Freedom of expression is part and parcel of democracy. Before the era of internet, rulers were used to use their particular tools to tell the people, hey people, this is rights for you, I have given this. But now people can easily verify where is their rights, how they can exercise their rights, whether the particular development contribution quote unquote given by the rulers is really given by them, or this is the matter of process of development. So now people started engaging themselves in the process of various development or democratic institutions.
Well, Mr. Aryal, are you happy with the way the laws relating to internet freedom have been amended in the recent years? How do you see the all amendments and introduction of the new laws concerning internet freedom here in Nepal?
See, freedom as such, freedom of expression or other kind of freedoms, or from fundamental rights perspective in Nepal, our constitution has given very wider perspective of fundamental rights. In particular, freedom of expression, we have specified provisions in the constitution itself. Constitution has ensured, guaranteed freedom of expression, freedom of press in particular articles. But in practice, based on those articles of constitution, there should be some developing approach of legislation. But while experiencing last decade in Nepal, there is a regression of making laws in particular freedom of expression perspective. So couple of years ago, government introduced electronic information technology bill in the parliament, and many sections of that bill was challenged by public at large, media organizations, and netizens, of course. But now, when the parliament is dissolved and when election is declared, now government has introduced that disputed provisions in the information technology bill as part of directives, which is ridiculous in that sense.
What are your recommendations for removing the contradictory provisions within the information technology bill plus the recently tabled social media directives?
See, freedom is the most precious term people want. When there are internet is very sensitive, of course. There are pros and cons of any medium. Like internet also has pros and cons. Internet has provided a big platform for various entrepreneurs, as I said. Teachers now, students are using internet as a very good source of information or education. It has given a good platform for all of us, but simultaneously there are some avails created by people in this platform. This is exception. In fact, there are general rule and exception. General rule is the use of internet is very significant, and exception is internet is also being misused by some avails. So yes, of course there needs certain laws to establish law and order in any jurisdiction, and in cyberspace also we require certain laws to maintain law and order in cyberspace as well. But when bringing any legislation, you need to put the priority about the development, priority about the freedom of individuals, freedom of citizens in particular. You can it means there are other laws as well. We have penal codes, we have Privacy Act, we have Electronic Transaction Act, of course so far being used since 2006 to address internet domain or information technology domain in particular from crime perspective. We have various laws. Rather than enforcing those laws with the awareness among the people about the use and misuse of technology, bringing these things into the curriculum at various levels, and making aware people about the risk of internet or information technology. We are trying to control the environment, we are trying to control the users, in particularly blaming them, giving some peculiar examples. So this is bad idea to take one or two instances to rule whole the universe or jurisdiction, in particular in that sense in Nepal. So yes, of course we need certain laws, particularly who are to be governed, who are to be controlled, why we need to control. Control should be justified. That's why in freedom of expression we said legitimate restriction. Constitution gives certain space for legitimate restriction. What are the legitimate restriction? What are the process of legitimate restriction? Any restriction should be under the provision of law. Any restriction should be based on the need. Any restriction should be proportionate. What is impact and what is the impact of that restriction. So this three-part test should be there. That's why it is very important to have a due process of law of legislation. Making a law should be very rational, just and fair. If making law is not rational and fair, then even parliamentary law is not accepted as a good law.
Well, Mr. Ariel, are you trying to say that the recent reforms and introduction of the laws and directives are not in line with the Constitution of Nepal and Nepal's commitment to international instruments on human rights?
Absolutely, you are correct in that sense. Because uh, many of provisions in this social media directives, if you go through the content of social media directives, there are certain restriction of expressions which are directly against the provision of constitution itself. Constitution has provided a few areas where we can make a law to restrict freedom of expression. For example, national security issues, for example, social harmony, though social harmony is also one of challenge area because it's very wide terminology to define, and another is this contempt of court and defamatory contents, and these are the major area where state can make a legislation.
Could you elaborate more on how the recent provision within the social media directive, differ with the constitution of Nepal?
Yeah, I'm coming in that process. So I have said restrictions, legitimate restrictions, provisions are there in the constitution, but constitution has confined where to make a legislation to restrict the expression. But in this social media directives in particular, government has proposed some serious issues like any rumors, any stalking or any activities. If you have any doubt, government or administrative authority has any doubt that that particular content violates the law, in that case Director General of Department of Information Technology can ask the media operators, social media operators to take down without any judicial, even to the users. And this directives dictates how to use your social media and handle device itself, how to use your mobile phone. You are not permitted to like, dislike or to retweet. So these are the things that very government is trying to micromanage the activity of citizens in particular in internet space. So trying to dictating the behavior of individual at that level, obviously against the constitutional guarantee in freedom. In our constitution, pre-censorship is totally restricted. Pre-censorship is restricted, and press materials is also violative to the constitutional protection. So, but this directives is giving the authority to Director General of Department of Information Technology to take down the content. If that content is not taken down, can also ask to stop that carrier, and even they can revoke the licensing of that particular media. Interestingly, in this directives, we have again introduced licensing regime in freedom of expression. Internet has very good resource. It unlike radio and television, it does not require that kind of frequency, and even that not require that regulation of name and other kind of things, because domain name is itself is very specific, and you cannot have identical domain name system by design itself. So it's already by design managed in that sense. So this directive requires registration of social media networks, social media platforms, and it requires periodic renewal. See, renewal of YouTube, can you imagine how it is possible? Periodic renewal of Facebook, Twitter in Nepal, how you can say this is possible? It's absolutely not possible, because it does not require as well. And another thing is whether to register a company or whether to register a product. If you require a register a product as carrier, then there are various developments. A product comes in 2 years and disappears, and then again new product comes, and that gives a very a big opportunity to the users, and they will also have more versions at a short span of time. So that is also very significant to talk about in this directives. And another thing is whether you are controlling or regulating content, or whether you are regulating carrier, it is very important. If you are trying to control or regulate content, we have already other legislation. A directive cannot control the content, because controlling content is intervening on rights, and by directives you cannot control or you cannot create rights, you cannot reject rights, you cannot make punishment, you cannot make that kind of liability, legislative liability by a directives. So this, from legislative perspective as well, this is very wrong approach to control rights from a directives. Only parliamentary law can create rights and punishments. So giving rights is okay, but penalizing, creating criminal obligation by a directives is totally unacceptable in legislative process.
Well, Mr. Ariel, very interesting point you raised. You also talked about the three-part test. Which are the areas, where restriction can be, justified? Because there is criticism that the content shared over internet sometimes directly affect some vulnerable groups, including children and women. So what are the areas where regulation could appropriately work?
See, if you go through the trend in Nepal about the crime in internet or cyberspace, most of the affected vulnerable groups are women and children. If we we think about regulating the platform, we have to higher priority to protecting child and protecting women in particular because of vulnerability groups. Even in women, my personal experience through the various court cases are from rather than urban, rural women are more impacted by the effect of crime in cyberspace. So it's very important to protect them, and very important part of protection is, rather than legislation, awareness is very important. Awareness to these vulnerable groups at various levels. If they are going to school, then some awareness campaigns at school levels, and some awareness campaigns at rural level, that is very important. And certain kind of recently we have a big debate of filtering of content, and filtering of content itself is very challenging issue. It's filtering content in internet is almost like breaker in highways. So this is very significant issue, how you put breakers in express highway. Internet is information superhighway. So if you are putting breakers in internet, then obviously there is a big challenge of usability of internet itself. So in that sense, what we can do, we can have parental guides, we can have self regulations at users, and we can manage a certain level of misuse from that perspective. And of course, at international level, child pornography or child abuse is highly intolerable in internet space, or beyond the internet space, or offline in that sense. So we can have certain legislative development on these areas to protect these seriously vulnerable, rather than focusing on required basis. We are trying to protect politicians in most of the case. Politicians are those people who are holding public sphere, public accountability, accountable positions. They are trying to protect themselves rather than protecting their institutions. They are not performing well based on their promise to the people through various means like election or other charters. Now they want to restrict the quote unquote attack by people. They think these are the attacks. In fact, these are the expressions of dissatisfaction of their performance. Now they are terming this as attack and trying to control these opinions. So this is very important to think about where to regulate, how to regulate, and by what kind of instrument to regulate. Rather than control, regulation is always a good term. So most important part in this internet freedom part is putting people interest first. What is the people interest? See, in recent past there are lots of social movements especially contributed by these social media platforms or internet platform in particular. There are people who are trying to divide into this platform itself, terming social media differently and online media or news based differently. But important part is internet freedom is important, as we started at the beginning. Why internet is important is internet has given the very common platform, very cheap. See, I am here at Yoho television. It takes a process to express my this opinion. We have to have certain access, we have to have certain infrastructure, we have to have certain limitations, but internet has given very easy access to each people without any money, just the bandwidth cost you pay at regular level. You can express your very
Adhyal,
significant things.
Do you see any specific impact of regulation over social media to the news media as well?
If you see the real user of news media, new media, particularly online media platforms, they ride on social media platforms. For example, after broadcasting this interview, you may put this in YouTube. So rather than its regular broadcasting viewers, you'll have more viewers in YouTube. So now social media platform has provided expanded effect of any kind of media, whether it's radio, television or print or online media. So whenever a news published, that is used in Facebook, YouTube or Twitter to have more access, to have more reach to the audience. So if you control social media, obviously you control impact of this traditional media itself. So this is very tricky thing. Election is coming. As I said, election is already declared. Election is not so far. When election is there, long debate or significant debates will be there in social media platforms. People will definitely challenge their incumbent parliamentarians or incumbent politicians. When they go to the constituency, definitely they will face big challenges in social media. So if you control social media, there are two aspects. As a media personnel, you are very aware about this self-censorship as well. If you put certain strict regulatory regime, then self-censorship will go very high. And when there is self-censorship situation is there, in particular in this kind of political campaigns, rather this is the process of democracy. If controlling social media now at this stage is controlling democratic
Are you trying
process.
to say that this proposed social media directive weapon, controlling the views in relations to the elections?
Yes, any legislation or any instrument should come in time. In certain time you can say wrong timing. Legislative process itself is significant. You have to judge the situation, whether this is really required at this stage, and if this could be detrimental to the democracy, you have to withhold that as well. So it's wrongly timed. I've been telling this is wrongly timed. So if you are trying to regulate at this nature, you should bring this in the parliament, not at the discretion of administrative authority. It means you want to control, not regulate. If you wanted to regulate, definitely you would have brought this at legislative with legislative source. This is not the legislative source, this is administrative authority source.
Well, Mr. Ariel, there are many interesting issues you're sharing with us, but we are coming to the end of the show. Do you have to share to our audience anything that I have left to ask you very quickly?
Very important. I'm repeating this part because awareness is very important part. While using, everything has pros and cons, good and bad. Using internet is good, and some people are there to misuse this as well. So I recommend all the stakeholders to focus on awareness, more awareness on using internet platforms. That is very significant part in this process. And concluding this, digital rights or internet freedom is very significant. This is the part of democracy now. If you take out from your behavior, now you are restricted to participate in the democracy. So I respecting all the stakeholders, let's respect the value of the democracy, and if you respect the value of democracy, you respect the maximize use of social media or internet or online media.
Well, Mr. Ariel, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Dear viewers, time now to wrap up the show. Keep watching us. See you next week. Namaste.